Buongiorno, benvenuti e benvenute a questo appuntamento, benvenuti in fiera. L'avranno detto già tutti da questa mattina, ma lo ridico anch'io dopo
Good
tutto.
morning. After waiting for so long, it's really extraordinary to have you hear all the word of Intralogistics, and also welcome to our conference, Safe We Are Born, where we'll be speaking about some aspects linked to safety in terms of designing of automated warehouses. I am Carlo Fumagalli, I'm a journalist, and I'll be the moderator of the session. And also, of course, you have the possibility of asking questions to our rapporteurs. So jot down your questions, and at the end of the first panel, you'll get this possibility. Automated warehouses, of course, are extremely complicated. This is something we know, and there are important challenges such as the density of stocks, the efficiency, but if we go around in this exhibition, well, in that aspect, we don't have specific technological problems. What we will be talking about is something different. How simple, how safe, how cost-effective will it be to have, for example, maintenance on a given plant, or, for example, the installation of an automated warehouse. And this is something we are going to discuss with our guests, because, of course, this is an issue where there are many actors involved. The producer, the maintenance technician, and so on and so forth. We have here Roberta Togni, who is the Vice President of Aisem, that is the Italian Association of Lifting, Elevation and Handling Systems, and Giuseppe Fabbri, who is a technical consultant. Then Luigi Monica, who is the person in charge of the technical aspects and innovation in INAIL, INAIL. And in the second panel, we'll have two end users, two representatives, so two very important companies. Antonio Orlando, who is in charge of Qualità Mondiali S.p.A, and Matteo Miele, warehouse operations manager of Benetton Group S.R.L. And so we start this conversation, and I'd like to start with Roberta Togni. We have been talking about an automated warehouse. Of course, it is a very complex system, many actors, design, manufacturing, and so on. These actors must talk among themselves, must speak to each other, but it is not simple. First of all, good morning. Well, it is a great pleasure to see so many of you in the audience, because we as Aisem Group, Aisem is the Italian Association of Lifting, Elevation and Handling Systems, and certainly it is not simple. And generally speaking, any dialogue in any situation is not simple, because quite often there are contracts that have been signed, and these contracts should have had as a precondition some form of dialogue, and some preconditions should be shared among the different actors. And the difficulty is the following: when we're speaking about automated warehouses, all this, the risk is an exponential one, because of course it's something extremely extended. Automated warehouses are robotized system. We simplify by using this term, robotized, that are aimed at handling and stocking of goods in an automatic way. These are places where, over the last few years, these places have become more and more common in Italy as well. So warehouses tend to become larger and larger, and this is also due to digitalization, because that our government as well as Europe are supporting in view of this 4.0 process, and the digital processes in companies, a digitalized industry also implies automated systems interacting between themselves, or among themselves rather. And this complex interaction also implies an interaction between machines, devices, or part of plants coming from different manufacturers. And these different items stay in the same system. So the machines themselves must speak to each other. And so, producers must learn how to start this dialogue just as much as machines. And here I'm not speaking only of machines, but within a complex system in a factory, we see that design of different producers are going to interact among themselves. We have different installers, different manufacturers, different forms of maintenance, and an important role is also to be played by the final user. Of course, it is a very complicated issue because the final product is a complex one, and also the responsibility deriving from this type of systems is also extremely complicated, and identifying who is the person who is supposed to take the decisions that will have an impact on the final accountability. Well, that as well is a very important issue. We believe that today, it cannot be avoided. I mean, we must discuss it. And Aisem, decided to start, let's say, the ball rolling. And we are glad to have here INAIL as well, since there are many actors involved. And I'd like to call on Sara Anastasi to start speaking about the automated warehouse, also from an EU viewpoint. As Mrs. Togni just said, the automated warehouse is a very complicated situation with the participation of different actors, and it is difficult to understand the role that these actors will be playing. First of all, the manufacturer, so the person that in practice produces this automated warehouse. The producer must first of all understand what is the community legislation that is in force. So the automated warehouse, regardless of its complexity, because of course the word of automated warehouse is extremely diversified, but what they all have in common is that they are all under the machine directive. So in fact they are machines because there are mobile parts that are moved by a force that is not a human being, so to speak. And so, of course, there are formal aspects, but not only that, because you also have a very important activity by the manufacturer, a very complicated activity by the manufacturer, especially for complicated automated warehouse where there is continuous automation and continuous exchange between the let's say the owner and the producer. Well, they must define first of all the destination of the product, because unavoidably that links to a risk assessment, identification of possible dangers in the use of the warehouse, which implies a number of design choices that are of course up to the producer. The difficulty of these complex structures derives that these are not turnkey products, so to speak. There is a moment when they have to be installed, and this installation phase may be more or less complicated, and so there must be an exchange of information by the end user, between the end user and the manufacturer, and these are at the basis of the choices to be made by the producer, by the manufacturer. But the manufacturer must be aware that he will be held accountable for those choices, actions of market surveillance, I mean, if there is any injury at work or any accident. So it is important to identify also the limits of one's own skills, also with regard to the choices that are made. Well, of course, there will be an involvement of other actors, I mean, end users, maintenance technicians, and manufacturers, and so on. But there are some responsibilities that clearly belong to the manufacturer. Going back to the title of our roundtable, Safe We Are Born. Well, of course, that is the case because we have there the machine directive, but this is not always possible. Sorry, off microphone, off microphone. So let's go back to the title, Safe We Are Born. Well, when this doesn't happen, why is it so? Our association has been working on that, and we have realized that one of the reasons or one of the most important reasons for this lack of safety, this final lack of safety, is due to the non-exchange of information at the right moment. Since we have already mentioned the machine directive, of course this refers to a principle of the machine directive, item 2, that says that safety must be integrated in the design, manufacturing, installation, and maintenance of the machine. And this is of paramount importance. And so the activity carried out by companies was very important because they shared with us the experience of the last over the last few years to try and understand in a way the guidelines, trying to set a sort of information transfer system that is truly effective. So we shouldn't sort of set very specific specifications saying that, well, I'll go just as far as that and so I can feel safe. But there must be areas of overlapping also of responsibility, because these areas of overlapping will give a maximum benefit in terms of safety of the plant. What happens when this is not the case, when we are not born safe? We have spoken about the installation. I mean, there are cases where things maybe were not as they should have been. And so I will be speaking about different tools we can use in our work to guarantee this safety. So the specificity of these products, of this automated warehouse, is the following. So this is not a turnkey product. It is not a product that you buy and that you can operate immediately. Well, there is a time of installation, a stage of installation that is rather complicated. Now, who is responsible for that? So it is important to delimit these responsibilities and what are the tasks of the different actors present there. I'm going back to the machine directive. The moment of installation for those products that, I mean, if they have to be used, they require a complex phase of installation, well, that is something that the manufacturer is responsible for. Well, this installation phase, of course, may not be carried out by the manufacturer or his or her staff. Of course, he can delegate this to someone else. So this is up to him or her, but he is responsible for the installation phase. So if the manufacturer wishes to delegate the installation phase to different to a different company, well, in the instruction handbook, well, he must provide all the instructions so that the installation phase is carried out in the best possible way, so that in the end the product is in line with the machine directive according to the different safety measures that are to be respected. This is a very difficult phase for the manufacturer because, well, he should be aware, for example, of the place where this automated warehouse is going to be set up. When we're speaking, for example, of the access to this automated warehouse, this accesses are part and parcel of the layout of the automated warehouse itself. So that part of the automated warehouse, I mean, the structure itself becomes one of the technical solutions that the manufacturer has ideated precisely to guarantee safety. We do a technical check of the market. We have become aware of the criticalities we may have in terms of the manufacturing of the shelving itself. And another aspect is that pertaining to installation. Now, Mr. Monica will tell us about one of these cases. What are the criticalities in this phase, and what are the criticalities the manufacturer had to face? As Mr. Anastasi said, the problem of installation, of course, that doesn't pertain only to automated warehouses, but to semi-complex systems, because the worker is in a situation where the normal safety measures are not installed. He must work at considerable heights, and there is, of course, a testing of the warehouse also during the installation phase. And in those situations, we had an injury at work, and so we had what we call market surveillance, that is the action by the state to check if the manufacturer has respected all the measures, all the provisions of the machine directive. And and in that case, in the whole of the European community, that machine or that device will no longer be marketable because it is considered unsafe. And of course, a very important role is played by this handbook, the maintenance handbook, where the manufacturer transfers a number of information that he considers useful for the operation and the maintenance. Well, we'll be seeing this aspect. It is very important for the end user, but also the installation of an automated warehouse implies a perfect knowledge of the working environment, because this working environment will shape in some way the shelving. So the installation becomes a sort of tailor-made work, because the warehouse must sort of take its shape within a given building. I mean, you cannot sell a complex automated warehouse if you don't know where this warehouse is going to be placed. And apart from the installation, I mean, also maintenance is very important. So maybe you can give us some example. Well, the instruction manual, the document we have been talking about, is essential also to define what are the maintenance and control activities that are to be carried out to keep the functionality of the warehouse effective. They are huge systems. They are extremely high. So in some cases, there are places where you have to intervene that are higher than 2-3 meters. And so that is something that you must take into account when producing the automated warehouse. I mean, he's responsible of the access routes to those maintenance areas, so you must guarantee safe access. So if ordinary maintenance doesn't require specific technical skills, so it is not an extraordinary maintenance, it is one of the workers of the end user, the access at that on that platform must be guaranteed as from the start. The manufacturer, when it puts the CE mark, he becomes responsible of all the existing routes. And so this is a responsibility that is up to the manufacturer, not to the end user. If you have something that is 10 meter high, you cannot tell the end user, now it's up to you to define the access route, or you should modify the plant to have the possibility of this access route. And that caused this serious injury. And there the worker had no safe access, so he had to improvise this access route. He got there with a platform with a sort of lift fork, and I mean, it is one of the most dangerous actions. I mean, when you go beyond the railings and you reach a sort of terrace that is not protected without any sort of protection. And so he fell down from that height with very serious consequences. And then there was an investigation, there was the market surveillance, and who is accountable for that? The manufacturer, the installer, the owner of the plant. And when the investigation starts, if it is an ordinary access route, the person who is accountant is still the manufacturer. So any solutions? Because the industry has started this dialogue with the elevation industry, lifting, shelving, automated structures, intralogistic systems. You have been trying to find good practices and also best practices. Well, certainly this is the starting point. I mean, this is what led us to start talking to each other. I mean, stressing the role of the manufacturer. This element was stressed again and again because automated warehouses are complex systems and different parts different parties interact for the creation of this automated warehouse. So identify the different roles and different responsibilities is essential so that the manufacturer at the end can get the plant certified and take up the responsibility for it. So good praxis and good practice that is something to be done beforehand and not afterwards, because afterwards, of course, things are much difficult. Our two groups, groups shelving and group Intralogistics, these are two groups, and we both we produce completely different products. These two products would fall under different legislation, different provisions, but the end product is one product that will have one single CE certification, CE mark. So it is important to identify the essential principle. The design of the shelving of the automated warehouse, automated machine. I mean, the design, it may be carried out by different professionals and different firms, but let's say that the rationale must be the same, the guidelines must be the same, as if the two engineering systems were to merge into each other. Well, not only the planning of the different parts of the system, but another essential element for us in the definition of our best practices that we'll be talking about later on. Another important aspect is that we must not only look at the final product, but also the interaction of the product in the system, because each installation site is different. So different environment, different temperature, different levels of risk for those who will be using the warehouse later on, be them the maintenance technicians or final users. So we have identified these basic principles of cooperation in engineering provisions, engineering rules, so that there is a real connection between the different parties. So now, what are these basic principles? What is the good practice? What is the consolidated best practice? And or rather, what are the aspects that are still to be studied and considered? I start with the easier question, the second one. Well, we have very many of those because I mean, they will follow the technological evolutions. So we'll set those aside. At present, with the two groups mentioned before, we have studied the standard situations, so where the experience acquired by manufacturers was such that they could in some way distill a sort of general procedure, a sort of general instruction book. For example, this access routes to very elevated positions, very high positions, and that is something that has already been mentioned. For example, having to retrieve a pallet or that in some place that is no longer accessible, or a machine that has had a failure. So we started thinking about this. So first of all, the correct access for workers, for maintenance technicians, also in an emergency. When they, I mean, these situations must be taken into account, because the work environment is not so friendly. They are 20 meters high on very well thin structures. So you may also consider that the person might face some difficulties and must be helped up there. So we have tried to identify these problems as essential issues when we start thinking about an automated warehouse. And then we also try to collect experiences that companies have shared with us, precisely not to start with a white sheet of paper. I mean, having best practices today and always in the future, to improve them and also to update them, because of course the systems will become increasingly complex. And for those who are listening to us, in a few minutes we'll give you the possibility of asking questions to our panel. Jot down the questions and then we'll be giving you the floor. And so we have been considering producer, manufacturer, installer, end user. So we go back to the end user, or we rather consider now the end user. The end user is the final actor, so to speak. We have the manufacturer first, the installer, and then the end user. It is the end user who has the greatest responsibility, because if those who came before him have not worked properly, well, the accountability is for the employer. When you choose an automated warehouse, first of all, you must consider the formal defects. It is a machine, it must have a mark, a CE mark, a conformity mark. As it got its maintenance handbook. If all these things are not present, the end user is at fault, because he has asked his workers to work on a machine that anyway is not has not been cannot be considered legal. I cannot, and further, I cannot buy a machine that has a CE mark, but that is clearly not in conformity. It is something that would apply if you went to buy a car. If the car hasn't got the safety belt, it is clear that the car is not legally acceptable. It is in that case the responsibilities of the end user. The end user is the one who is always found at fault if the people before him have not worked properly, and or if the end user has not chosen actors, has not chosen people capable of managing those phases in the best possible way, because it is up to the end user to guarantee maintenance, control, updating, and so on and so forth. And so this adjustment, so to speak, of the warehouse when they need more space, or the needs may change, and so the capacity of the warehouse may increase. These are changes to the warehouse that would expose the end user to other problems. So modifying a plant, and when they modify a plant, they would shoulder the responsibility of the manufacturer. So if even though he is the last one in terms of time, he is the one that has the majority of the responsibilities. Training, what about training for maintenance, for installers and maintenance technicians? Well, the answer is certainly yes. We have become fully aware of that, much more than we used to be some years ago. We have 24 producers, so potential manufacturers, who sit around a table to share guidelines and best practices. I mean, that of course is, this means they have become fully aware of all that. But I mean, awareness is not enough. You must share knowledge, and the sharing of knowledge requires the organization of training, of planned training, and that is a sort of flywheel, because if you do that, people automatically become increasingly aware after starting this dialogue, and so overcoming this difficulty of speaking about such complex problems. So after having creating, let's say, 2 round tables, different manufacturers sharing best practices to be put on the market. Well, of course, we believe that training is the next step. So we are studying training plans, training courses for the planning of a safe automated warehouse. This training will be organized in the next few months. on the basis of clusters, because of course the training must be sort of tailor-made depending on the different roles. So we'll have training for designers, installers, maintenance technicians, and also suggesting training also for the end user, because the end user is in fact the person who must manage the warehouse, and will also be studying shared training among clusters of companies of the same area, because by doing that you can widen the expertise. With the work we have been doing so far, of course, we have very good basis, and we can overcome the difficulty, that you may have a violation of privacy, secrecy of installations and maintenance, because that must be considered in a different way. I mean, training and sharing of best practices in view of guaranteeing the safety of workers. This dialogue in the association was defined as a starting point so that manufacturers can follow rules that are identical for all. But of course, it is not easy to identify who is accountable for what. Today's meeting has already stressed one aspect of this product. It is absolutely necessary to cooperate, to start a dialogue among the different actors. I mean, they all participate in a different way in the creation and management of this product, the product that we call automated warehouse. We have started a very important work. We have started something that we hope in the future may become a great collaboration. I mean, starting not so much from identifying responsibilities, but rather understanding how to have a safe product. And this moves from the idea of the collaboration among the different actors, and then maybe identify who is in charge of what, because in such a complex reality it's not simple who is in charge of what, or who is accountable for what. But I mean, what matters is that you have a safe use of the automated warehouse. So we are more than willing to cooperate so that this can be the starting point for a cooperation aiming at this common objective. Since very soon we'll have two end users here on stage, and one of the possible conclusion of this first panel, the end user is one of the protagonists of this change. This could be a closing. Well, first of all, I wish to thank Mrs. Anastasi, who is the representative of the Intralogistics groups, and also I'm also here on behalf of the shelving group. Well, we wish to thank you for participating in today's event. It is an issue that all manufacturers, on which all manufacturers try to cooperate, and we all try to get better and an increasingly better situation. Technological innovation goes very fast. The companies are very innovative, so it is pretty difficult to keep pace with this very rapid technological development. And so having your support as INAIL may be very helpful to focus on our energy on what is most important, so as to have a product that is really and truly safe. Of course, the end user, well, we have already spoken about the end user. The end user is a very important actor, and in my opinion, he's one of the essential drivers, because of course the association has an essential role in identifying the content, let's say the heart of the problem. The end user is the accelerating factor, because only through the end user can we enforce all the essential principles, because the end user, if the end user considers all these aspects, I mean, this may imply, may have economic consequences, and so the end user must truly understand that this is an inner value of the product. So they must believe in this type of approach, and in some cases they must also accept that there is an intrinsic economic value. And when we speak about training as well, we believe that the end user is an important driver. And probably in our training activities that we are considering, well, we'll set up a sort of certificate, a sort of license for producers, maintenance technician, also proposing that to the end user. We hope this is not considered simply as a cost or as an element of bureaucracy, but of course that they are considered as essential for safer design. And so the end user for us is and will be an accelerator of this very complex process. A smart maintenance, of course, is also a cost-saving approach, and we, in choosing our title, whether we wanted to give this idea also of cost saving by appropriate planning, by appropriate design. Thank you. Is there any question? Is there any question from the audience? We have 2 microphones, so by show of hands. Very soon we'll have 2 case histories of 2 end user that now are installing this complex automated warehouse. If there is any question you'd like to ask to our panel, you may ask something on the basis of your experience or any sort of suggestion. In the meantime, I'm looking at Giuseppe Fabbri. Maybe you can go back to a question I asked you. So, what are the most common situations if there are no questions from the audience? Well, they are talking to each other, so maybe they are thinking about a question. Well, someone must start. We were together with the different companies examining safe products. Of course, with the different technical offices, and all the regulations were abided by. Of course, also for self-protection. And then we realized that the sum of safe products doesn't necessarily lead us to a safe ensemble. So we must truly work on these interfaces between different parts. And the real difficulty is that these interfaces must be extremely dynamic, because the system that we must interface are evolving all the time. Maybe slightly less for shelving, but well, shelving increases in size, but certainly this is the case for when we are, for example, when we are speaking of machines such as stacker trucks. So identifying the criteria for proper interfacing in the different situations, of course, that is one of the factors affecting safety, which is the priority in any installation. We have been speaking of jumping from the platform, so well, of course, that is a nightmare, our nightmare, because I mean, you must be aware that it shouldn't be done, and still, how can it be avoided? I mean, or people thinking that they might have to go up a ladder for 20 meters with a rucksack on their shoulders. And who helps us to understand that it is not a good idea to jump from the platform and to, I don't know, step on something different, maybe using safety measures, using special protection and so on. So this is something that then triggers a different initiative, because of course we want to solve this problem. Thank you. We thank our rapporteurs. Please stay with us in the first rows, because also at the end of this second panel we may still want to ask you this a few questions, and I wish to thank all of them. And now I give the floor, I invite here Antonio Orlando, who is, and Matteo Miele, who is Warehouse Operations Manager of Benetton Group. So two companies. The first one is the person in charge of logistics and quality at Mondial, S.p.A. Well, I'd like first, well, you can introduce your company just to give us the idea of your activity, and I start with Antonio Orlando from Mondial. The company was created in 1946, marketing of all the products for the transmission of movement, so linear systems, chains, modules for tool machines. Our main customers are automotives, motorcycles, machines, machine tools at large, and the mechanical textile area. It has a warehouse in Linate where we market some of our problems. Then we have another warehouse in Piacenza where we have some production, and we have also the tailoring of the linear system, and then the Bologna warehouse that essentially considers chain products. And now you have this important system of the automated warehouse. Can you give us the details of this installation? Well, we already have an automated warehouse that was created some 30 years ago in Lainate, but there we have only 40% there. Now we will have a warehouse that is 1,200 square meters, 18 meters high, with 3 lanes. 2 are for trays, 60/20, and another one double depth for pallets. So the objective is managing with 4 bays, two picking and refilling, so the retrieval and then the transformation of pallets into trays, and through the mechanical the automated warehouse, we can manage the whole. So, for example, we have a pallet for chain and bringing then this material to the production area. As a warehouse, we have a mixed solution, so trays and pallets, because in our experience the tray management is very rapid, very safe for the operator, because it is very low. You don't have to retrieve material from pallets. For us it is an excellent solution. With this solution we have the goods that move, but the people stay still, so this increases the operation speed, it increases safety, because we have reduced the use of forklifts, concentrating everything in Piacenza. So rather than 3 warehouses, we have just 1 warehouse in Piacenza. So saving for the company, because of course we reduce staff and we can have better contracts also in terms of scale economy for transport and cardboard and the different components. And from that viewpoint, we have a good advantage. And you are doing that at present. We have finished the mechanical part, and now we are working on the electrical part, and we should start producing in August. During the holidays, we will be filling the warehouse, and I'm asking now Matteo Miele from Benetton Group. So first of all, tell us something about your activity, of course, especially in terms of logistics, and then you may tell us what type of installations you are planning to install. I'm here to represent Benetton Group. It's a company that needs no introduction. We have been working with physical shops since the 60s, and now, of course, we also have an online channel. Benetton is a company that sells every year some 60 million garments, and a very high percentage through the e-channels. We have 1 warehouse in Treviso, 60,000 square meters of warehouse, where automation had started at the end of the 80s. So the first stacker trucks date back to 84. What we are doing at present, we are installing a new plant. This new plant will be especially geared to the online channel, because in 2020, as many companies, of course, we had this explosion of e-commerce after the first wave of pandemics. So together with a team of first development team, we must do something to get close to our clients' need, and because they are getting more and more used to the Amazon model. I order tonight and I have the goods at home the day after. So we have considered different solutions, stacker trucks, and then we decided for this AutoStore. Why did we choose AutoStore? Well, first of all, because in terms of production efficiency, so the ability to handle very easily. This is the first reason for us to choose that solution. The second reason was really the physicality of the plant. It was a plant that was perfect for our buildings, for the shape of our warehouse. And then there is an aspect of maintenance that was mentioned before as well. This plant can work without stoppages during working hours, so the average time between one stop and the other is very long. And maintenance interventions that, of course, would block the plant can be reduced to a minimum during daytime, and in most cases they can be carried out can be carried out when the plant is not operational, so creating also less anxiety in the maintenance technician. So we have been speaking about dialogue in the first panel. In your case, how did it work? I mean, how did you work with the producer? Well, the warehouse is tailor-made, because initially we had analyzed our flows, our operation, and we wanted a mixed solution, pallet and trays. Then we looked for manufacturers to manage the solution, Automa and Modublock. And so they made it possible for us to adopt this mixed solution. Of course, with our suppliers, we also managed other tailored solutions, say for the boxes that bring the material on another semi-automatic line for the packaging. So there was a very good dialogue. And we, with the experience we had, we also managed this Mondial team. There was the person responsible for logistics, but also the person responsible for safety and warehouse, and and these are the final users. So initially we worked with them for the design for the project of the plant, and now that we have finished practically the mechanical phase, we have introduced some small changes in terms of ergonomics and safety of individual operators. The head, the chief of the warehouse, the person who is in charge of the warehouse as such, the warehouse manager, is the. We had there the different people, the different actors. The person who, for example, was in charge of the fire danger. So you must buy safe plants, but if this dialogue doesn't work, the plant is not safe. For example, the anti-fire company and the automator, well, of course, we had to organize things in such a way that the two plants would talk to each other so as to guarantee maximum safety, and so that you can operate in the correct way if there is a situation of risk or alarm or fire, for example. So we have been working with the different suppliers within the project. So this is something that is, this dialogue is going on, and of course, not only at the design stage, but of course we have continuous meetings depending on the different situations we have been managing. This is not your first experience in the area of automation. So in closing, I'd like to ask you, what is the evolution of the awareness of the subjects they've been talking about? Well, we have already had the first experience of an automated warehouse, even though over time it lost some of its efficacy due to limits that emerged over time. But Mondial has always been very, very keen on automation, because it's also our business. In our company, we have two sectors that are Technomotion and Smart Factory, that deal with industrial automation and motion control. And we have been developing a solution of a possible interface of these solutions of AMR or AGV together with the automated warehouse. So it is a sort of upgrading for Mondial itself in terms of automation, so efficiency, safety through industrial automation. Thank you very much indeed. What about Benetton Group? How did the dialogue fare in your case? Well, we chose a coordinator, so the manufacturer doesn't directly install the shelving. So we chose the company that gave us the possibility of, acquiring the basic principles of the plant and then study customized solutions together. It is not a turnkey product. Of course, you can see them, you understand how it works, but the development, customization is the most important moment. So we wanted to concentrate on that because customization, yes, from the logical, functional, ICT viewpoints, but also from the operational viewpoints. Just one example. Normally, in most warehouses, the operator must walk for kilometers to pick the objects that must be sent to the final customers. And in our solution, apart from improving maintenance, because of course you don't have works to be carried out on top of ladders or so on. So we would help not only maintenance but also operations. So the operator tomorrow will not walk for 12 kilometers. He can stand in an ergonomic position at a picking station where he can work in a much more relaxed way. If I consider the injuries we had over the last years, they were very light injuries, but they were due to lack of attention by the operator because he had to kneel down to get an object at floor 0, or because he has slipped on the floor, because he was not careful enough, because he was tired after many hours of work. But we had minimal injuries, but with a different technical solution such as this one, we might, if not eliminate, but reduce accidents because the ergonomics is completely different during the day. From the viewpoint of maintenance, there is a functionality that is very, very good, that whereby the operator can call the robots on the computer. In the computer on my maintenance platform, I can recall the robot for maintenance. Of course, this can't be done in 100% of cases, but if I reduce the frequency of maintenance, well, of course, I reduce the risk. The evolution of this awareness over the years. Well, in my company, it has always been a must. So we started with automation in the 80s, and we've always been very keen on safety for maintenance and operation. Of course, what was very important was this dialogue with the supplier to find the best possible solutions in terms of maintenance. AutoStore provides a very standardized solution for maintenance, and it is a solution that may not seem the speediest in the world for maintenance, but is also the safest one. So we must be very careful in applying what is in the handbook. It is safe. It is safe. Is there any question for our two rapporteurs on the case stories we've just listened to? If that is not the case, because we'll be meeting again also at the end of this session, I wish to thank Matteo Miele and Antonio Orlando. Thank you for being here with us, and so we can in this round table, or rather these two panels, we can say that the people we talked about from the manufacturer to the end users are in fact protagonists. And now I ask Sabrina Cheroli to come here on the podium, because the guidelines, the good practices are now, since this morning, in fact, they have become an official legal text. Well, you can find it published on the www.aisem.it, and come to our stand that you'll see through the windows. You can identify it with the 3 balloons for a drink and a snack, and also to get the position paper. You'll find both of them. We have a flyer that is a sort of summary. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. I wish to thank our rapporteurs, and of course I wish to thank the fair for organizing this conference. We thank the technicians and also the lady who has been translated everything into English. And see you again very soon. Thank you.